All right, Jeff, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, no problem, Stefan. Good to see you.
So I'd love to start at kind of the beginning of your Bitcoin journey. So what was for you the catalyst to start you in your Bitcoin journey and kind of your Bitcoin origin story, if you will?
Well, the negative Bitcoin origin story was when my technology team told me about it in 2010, 2011. And they were urging me to, but I was too busy to care about it. So shame on me. Everyone has one of those stories. I bought a little bit in 2017, just wanting to learn more. But the real kind of breakthrough was in 2019 in writing my book, and understanding kind of what was happening. And then as I investigated that this could be a transition, that this could be, it could resolve the conflict I was talking about in my book. Uh, then I started becoming far more interested in holding Bitcoin. But even at that point, and I've said this many times, even at that point, I wasn't sure. Like, I felt that it had probably a 5% probability, at least in my mind, that it would fail at some point. And for all the reasons that everybody says today and more. But but my primary reason was this. Um, the existing system that most people give all of their attention to because they live in it and they price from it, they would make stronger, and against Bitcoin. And we were seeing it throughout human history, something that could stop the being stop kind of that pressure to be cheated.
Okay.
So if you understand it from that lens, then you would have to expect everything and more being thrown at to be able to be stopped. So I went through virtually, at least even today, what I can think of, every different possible attack vector. And as I did, I realized that they were insufficient attacks, and they wouldn't kill Bitcoin, and decreased my probabilities of failure down, and then started investing far more of my time and energy into it.
Yeah. And I think actually it's interesting to start also your pre Bitcoin journey, I guess, with the writing of the book, The Price of Tomorrow, right? Because you are an entrepreneur who's been in technology, for some time. And The Price of Tomorrow, it's a fascinating book that, highlights many concepts, one of which is, of course, this idea around technological deflation and how, because of technological advancements, the world should be getting cheaper, essentially. And correct me if I'm wrong with any of this, but we're not really seeing that play out, right? So because it's interesting to me that you wrote this book before you had really gone down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and discovered it. So what was for you the main motivation to even start writing The Price of Tomorrow, and what urged you to do that?
Yeah, if you read it today, you can see everything that I predicted is just coming true, kind of at the pace that I said it would come true. And it's driven by um, productivity increasing, um, exponentially increasing, and that productivity should be flowing to society in the form of lower prices. And if that was the case, then every single human on this planet would get richer by that productivity rate every year, even if they didn't work.
Hmm.
Right, so they would just get richer. The natural state of a free market is deflation, and everyone would get richer by that productivity rate every year. But the existing system has to capture that productivity, because if you allowed deflation from it, the existing credit system would completely collapse. So it has to continually manipulate money at a faster and faster rate, actually offsetting the productivity rate, which concentrates wealth into very few hands, very few businesses. Then government, essentially, government spending becomes everything. As it's not a free market at all. It's a control system. Actually, highlight what I just said a little bit more. Anything that stops the productivity rate from flowing to society is not an economic system. It's
Mhm.
a control system. So no matter what you call it, it's a control system. So the natural state of a free market is deflation, and in that world, we would get richer through creating value for each other and using the things that create most value. And we trade with each other all over the world, and it would just keep on reducing prices everywhere. Uh, that is a that's very negative for a system that extracts time control from you, because all of those jobs that require people to tell you what to do go away.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of, key points that you make there, and I guess for a lot of people, they may be wondering, why and how did we get here? Why are we indeed living in a world where productivity has increased, immensely? Even just technologies that we use every day, if you would use them 50 to 100 years ago, like even the now with the latest developments in AI, where you just can have these large language models accessible to you to learn basically anything. But yet it seems like people are struggling more and more to get by and to just have, a regular living. So how did we get here?
Because people are measuring from a system that extracts from them, and they don't know that they're living from a system that extracts from them. So by trying to win in that system and win more of the pie, they're making it worse for themselves. And it actually doesn't matter who you are in that system. Even if you said you were a billionaire in that system, yes, you're winning more than the person who's working for wages. But 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 how hollow that life becomes, um, in that system, and what ends up happening at the end of days on that, where it has to get taken back through either a changing government taking it, extracting it, or a revolution taking it back. All of the people playing that game are playing prisoner's dilemma inside a system, and and so a lot of people think they're winning or trying to win enough to be able to protect their families, and well, underlying that entire structure, they're losing. So how do you get there? Mostly the incentives of a system and not knowing you're inside it.
Yeah. And how do people, because it's hard to realize. I mean, I think one of the things with Bitcoin that's so interesting is because once you start to learn about Bitcoin, if you really are curious and start to go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, it naturally leads you to learn more about money and monetary history and how money works. But for most people, do you think it's just not knowing that the system that they're in is kind of trapped, essentially?
Yeah. So fear keeps people stuck. So look at any friend of yours, look at anyone you know, and if they they their version of reality is true, right? Or so they look out kind of a mirror reflection of their belief structure, uh, and it comes back to them. If you saw somebody who hated the world, and everything in it, they would find other people that hated the world and everything in it. It would be a mirror reflection, and for them, it's true. So what's happening in Bitcoin is people are finding a different reality, one filled with hope, truth, hope, and abundance. And as they're moving to it, they're more and more people are finding that. Now we're really early, and most people, and it's easy to simply hope is way more powerful than fear.
Hmm.
But fear is very powerful in keeping people stuck. That's how the COVID regulations come in. That's how all regulations, how all individual rights and freedoms die, is through fear to be able to consolidate power. And hope is more powerful, but you can't underestimate fear, and most people are stuck in that fear. So if you fear to try to get somebody out of fear, it's largely not going to work, right? To so so that's often why I just think about kind of things I say in this ecosystem to build a path to hope, build a path to truth, to build a path to abundance. And then when people don't leave where they're stuck to be more stuck, they leave stuck to find hope.
Hmm. And how do you think, because I agree with you, I think fear is a powerful driver for a lot of people, but do you think it's a lack of, I guess, knowledge of the alternative system, which we of course know as Bitcoin, or why do you think it is that people, feel trapped? Is it exactly that? Like, because, like, for example, when I was reading your book, for me, it's such a clear thesis that makes so much logical sense. Because even if you just look at the one of the main thesis, which is, the technological deflation, that makes sense. You could explain that to anybody, and they would be like, okay, yeah, we should be getting more productive. We should be having more free time because technology should free up, a lot of the things that we typically had to do manual labor and work a lot of hours for. Um, and like for you, when you were starting off with your book and writing this, because in hindsight it seems so obvious, right? But what was that initial reaction that you were getting from people when they were reading that book?
Yeah, so I talked about this for 10 years before I wrote the book, and the high at that time it was like glossy eyes. Yeah, you're a crazy person, um, and like I mean, completely, you're a crazy person, um, and 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 that's what compelled me to write the book is watching things get worse and worse, or and then projecting how much worse they would get from the existing system because they were exponential patterns, and seeing what that would do with for my kids and the world at large from that system. So I did not want to write that book. It, I felt I had to write that book, and when I was writing the book, I remember I was from the technology system. I was all of the people inside this thing that still today can't see it because they're enriched by it. I many of those people. This was my cohort. And it meant it went turning against those people in my truth. But I ha- but I had to. Um, and and out of that, like once you see an insight like that, and it is really simple, right? It's really simple, and maybe some of the big things in life and those breakthroughs are simple, where they've always been there. They've always been self-evident, uh, and and it just clicked for people, and a whole bunch of people realized that was true. Now, I will say this: people, even today, I get all the time that people they knew what I was saying was true, but it took them like 3 years to actually fully comprehend how much depth that meant, because it changes everything. Well, I get that too, because we don't have, if we say 5,000 years of human history, and all of our knowledge is built on previous knowledge, and all the books we read, and all of those books we read contain error codes from the financial system and the economic system and the political systems we've always been in, then all of our neurons fire against that. We don't have the full architecture to hang new thoughts and new paradigm off of. And so what I was introducing is a new paradigm. And so that mental architecture almost has to be developed. You have to, even if it's intuitive, even if it, now you have to think, what does that mean? And then what does this thing mean to it? What is the next thing? And that process in rewiring your brain and unlearning all of the things that you've known is a challenging process.
It really is, and I think that's why for most Bitcoiners, I think it is such a radical shift, because it does. I think first, when you initially discover Bitcoin on a surface level, it's, cryptocurrency. You're like, okay, a new technology, interesting. But as you start to unpack the layers more and more, you realize how deep, it is, and the different facets. And like you said, it does really like force you to question your current ways of thinking and the paradigms that you have. So for you, when you were writing The Price of Tomorrow, because you didn't set out to write, I think The Price of Tomorrow has become a very popular book in the Bitcoin space because it aligns very well with the thesis of Bitcoin as well. But when you were writing the book, you didn't initially set out to make it a Bitcoin book. So how did that process look for you when you were writing the book that then led you to discovering Bitcoin?
Yeah, the and remember, I did hold a little bit of Bitcoin before that, but I realized but yeah, it was to your point, I really started to discover it and what but the I felt like people don't go to a solution without knowing the problem.
Mm,
Right? It's really hard to get somebody to be open to a solution if they don't know a problem. And about people in the Western world, we're sitting on the benefit side of of that problem to say South America, and they had no idea. They had no idea that they were essentially stealing money. And you had modern day economics. You had modern day slavery through an economic system that made it okay, and then you donate a little bit of your money to somewhere over there, and you just you go on with your day, not knowing that there's a consequence to your actions and that you're actually stealing. You're part of a system of total corruption in the world. So, and you can sleep at night because you say you've donated to those poor people who can't save themselves when it was in fact your economic system that was driving. Um, so so those are hard truths that people don't want to admit to, or would, or even if they admit it, oh, that's too big a problem. I don't want to. They'll just move past it. But if you sit with that hard truth, and then there's a solution, um, I I would say I want to be careful here, so I'd actually have to say it. But if you know that there's a solution to that hard truth, and you're not actively moving through the solution, you kind of have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, "What are you doing?"
hmm.
Right? And so if you're complaining about the world around you in that world, and immigration and what the world looks like and how there's misinformation everywhere and how it seems to be dividing, and you're making that stronger, you might want to look in the mirror.
Yeah, agreed. And I think around this topic, so we know that the current system has a lot of problems and a lot of flaws. Do you think inherently that the system that we live in now, that it does come through corruption, bad people at the top, so to speak, or do you think it's more of a, I guess, a misalignment of incentives, if you will, that
Incentives. There's um, think about it, just a line, and just say, where where does good begin and bad begin, or like where, pick, like, if 0 to 100, where's good and bad, right? Where's really good and really bad, right? It like you this is if you give a system of truth, you will find more people acting honestly, and like on an honest network, you'll find more people are 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 good with, I think, what you represent by good. I mean, but a lot of those people that are stuck in that other system that's based on incentives, and you see actions of them trying to make enough money to pay for their families, and or telling themselves a story that I have to do it for the greater good. They think they're good, right? And I don't want to use that term to be able to like, where does cold begin, heat end, right? These these are polarities, and and they're vibrational. And so how do you how do you put out darkness? You turn on the light. This is light. More people will find themselves acting with better interests for all of society in the honest, and it'll be emergent as a result of that. Because if you try to cheat the system, you get we've never had a system that cheating that cheating didn't pay, right? Economic. if you could control money and drive inflation into it, you could consolidate wealth by stealing productivity from everybody who was on that system. So, so of course, through that lens, you'll get a whole bunch of people that are really good at it because that's games played. Um, on this system, if you try to do that, you're going to get liquidated,
Mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful thing, which is going to be really harsh for the people that have been used to playing that game, because the system is this game is based on cooperation. This game is on honest actors, and the more you do for other people, positively do for other people in this ecosystem, the more you're rewarded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fully agreed. And so we talked about people being trapped by fear in the current system, and maybe also that being a bit of a lack of knowledge of what Bitcoin offers. And I mean, to be fair, Bitcoin is a complicated technology initially to explain and to for people to understand, because as we discussed, also it does force you to question things that you've maybe never really thought about before. And so for you, how do you go about that conversation? Because we all know the system is there, but it's still a matter of getting people to become aware of it and then making the choice to opt out, right?
Well, that's why I use the natural state of the free market is deflation. Um, create value for other people. And if we don't create value, if you're a CEO of a company or working for a company trying to create value and it doesn't create value, it fails.
Mm.
Why? Because as the purchaser of that value, you're constantly comparing what gives you more value. So if those two things are true, you know that the free market has to be deflationary. And then we trade with people all over the world to get more value. And if you add technology to that, it has to be exponentially deflationary. It has to ride at the same rate the technology moves, and that technology will move faster as just the trend line of technology moves faster, but as we build more things to drive greater efficiency, and we add more human minds into more shots on net to provide more value. So today, you have 500 million people kind of part of this, part of the winning class, and 7 billion people being enslaved by it. If you added 8 billion minds to what we're talking about, the rate of deflation would only speed up. In other words, instead of saying rate of deflation in this case, say the rate of abundance for society would only, because that's the output. More ideas, more hope, more, and so living in that paradigm would mean almost in time, virtually no need for money. It would be a staggering abundance, and Bitcoin is the path that allows us to get to that, because it's the only free market. Now, I don't look at it as a technology. I know some people do, but if you look at it as a technology, then I think a lot of people are easily swayed into, MySpace was a technology, and so it fails, and then the new winning faster one wins. So if you think about it through a technology lens, then a lot of people are confused, and they look for all of the other altcoins and nonsense. I look at it as a protocol bounded by energy.
Hmm.
And so in in that protocol bounded by energy, at least what we're talking about right now, Bitcoin kind of layer one, not lightning or anything else, but protocols come in layers, and that this is bounded by energy and creates energy abundance by its very nature, means it doesn't care if you want to price Bitcoin from your piece of paper, right? It doesn't care. It doesn't care if the government wants to expand by 30%. It doesn't care. Doesn't care. It doesn't care anything that's happening in the system. It's repricing the whole thing, and you can prove that. You can say, look at house values in the protocol bounded by energy, and you see they're all falling. They're actually they're exactly what my thesis would say. Right, prices falling, marginal cost of production in everything. If you look at energy prices relative to that protocol, same thing. You look at everything. That's what's um, so now that beginning of that protocol, that layer one of the protocol, is enforcing that free market that we're talking about, that is that transition path to human abundance. And all you have to do, because it's permissionless, open, open, decentralized, and secure, all you have to do is, today you can own a piece of it. You can own a piece of the protocol. You couldn't own a piece of the internet. Okay? It means all the future value that ever comes on top of it, you also own a piece of by owning the protocol. Um, and throughout, and that means that whatever relative value of Bitcoin that you think is today, as all prices fall against it forever, it's almost infinite if you could hold on to it long enough, because the purchasing power of it keeps on increasing, increasing, increasing. Yes, it'll be volatile, but that is going if you're owning a piece of the protocol. And then because it's so decentralized, secure, bounded by energy, creating energy abundance, now different layers are being built on top of it, like lightning, and liquid, like Fediment, which and like Noster, that are giving increased functionality and all different use cases to be built on top of it. And we're very early in this evolution, but it's wildly exciting. I cannot believe, I can't believe I get to play in it.
Yeah, agreed. And I want to touch on some of what you just said a bit later, but first I want to get back a bit to a point you just made earlier, which was also because I want to also play a bit of devil's advocate, because I know the idea is to appeal to a lot of new people coming into the space.
Yeah.
And something that I encounter quite a bit is people indeed view Bitcoin more as a technology. And you know, as you mentioned, we have about 500 million Bitcoiners, or Bitcoin people who own Bitcoin. There's about 7.5 billion people who don't. If you're joining the space, it could be easy to say like, okay, yeah, well, you know, you got in early, you're lucky. Bitcoin is already kind of like, you know, reached not its potential, but you know, it's kind of, you've kind of experienced a lot of the gains, if you will. There, maybe I will go look at these other currencies, or this other new coin that was just invented. How do you handle, you know, those conversations typically? Because I know that's something that happens quite a bit in the space, and it is.
So that's an easy one, really easy one. By the way, the first thing, I wasn't talking about Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners before. I was talking about the existing financial system. 500 million people
Ah, okay,
are
okay, okay,
winners, and 7.5 billion people are effectively enslaved by it.
okay, gotcha.
So that's what I was talking about. Yeah, the Bitcoiners, true Bitcoiners. If you just said the your knowledge of Bitcoin versus kind of an average person's knowledge of Bitcoin, and then a new Bitcoiner, is, I would say, it's a staggering depth. It's a very different depth. So even Bitcoin, owning it, let's say owning it in an ETF, is step one. You're trying to make money in the financial system, and you're not actually secured with Bitcoin because you don't have your own keys. So, and then layer two, level two is and maybe you own some other Ethereum and everything else. So layer two, you only own Bitcoin and ETF. Layer three, you move to self custody. As you go down that path, and you realize it's a completely independent financial system that's and protocol that's emerging alongside the other one, and it's repricing the other one. As you go down level by level by level, you never go back,
Hmm.
right? And you're deep. So now, if you just take all of the Bitcoiners, there's a whole bunch of Bitcoiners that are going to sell their Bitcoin for homes,
Hmm.
um, because they think, now I can get a home. But they fail to grasp that home is massively overvalued in the fiat system, and it's marginal. It's falling to its utility value in Bitcoin. And if they just waited another 3 or 4 years, they could buy 20 homes. And so, why will it distribute? It'll distribute forever because of that. And if most Bitcoiners don't know that, and every single person that you're talking to is just at step one, new people, then we are so infinitely early. on. It's repricing the entire system. So how much is the entire system in today's purchasing dollars? It's $900 trillion balance sheet.
Mm-hmm.
That $900 trillion balance sheet has $400 trillion of debt. If you paid back the debt at $1 a second, it would take 12,873 years to pay back. By the way, in my book in 2019, the debt was only 250 trillion. And in my book, the preceding 20 years had an under 108 20 years had an under $185 trillion of growth in debt. So as technology was moving faster, debt had to offset the other side. So in 4 years or 5 years, we've had an extra, it took 20 years before, now we've had an extra $150 trillion of debt. We're about to hit a cycle that is going to be staggering. So now if you take that $900 trillion of, so you can just, and it's not a perfect example, but just imagine somebody purchasing every day and they own their house free and clear title, and it's in that 100 trillion, or if they own enough equity in their home, then they feel like they can purchase, borrow against the home, borrow. So that would be a good proxy for how wealthy people feel, right? Those assets minus but those assets include all the banks, but every business, every building that you see in downtown, a corner store, your house. It includes everything globally, 900 trillion. And so the purchasing power of that, if Bitcoin replaces that, and all Bitcoin has to do to stay decentralized and secure, and it will inevitably reprice everything. So if it stays decentralized and secure, then that purchasing power of today's Bitcoin is 43 per Bitcoin. It's actually probably higher than that because you lost coins and everything else out of the division. So 900 trillion divided by 21 million, you get 43 million. Now we both know, or anybody that's followed the financial system knows, it cannot stay at 900 trillion. The debt stay at 400 trillion. It has to exponentially increase to be able to keep you locked in. 900 trillion might be 2 quadrillion in 5 years. Right. Now, if it is, and Bitcoin's value is now, instead of 43 million per coin, it's 95 million, 94 million per coin, that purchasing power hasn't changed. It's the same purchasing power. But the more important thing is, so when people price Bitcoin through the piece of paper being devalued, I've just at a loss for words, right? It's because it's impossible to price something with all of the with these moving parts, when in fact it is repricing everything. But the bigger part of what we talked about before is all prices relative to that $43 million per coin fall forever.
Hmm.
And so the purchasing value of that increases forever.
Yeah.
So if you're today's value of Bitcoin, think how early you are.
Yeah. No, definitely. And it is because once I think it's hard sometimes to conceptualize it because you can kind of, like you just, laid it out, you can kind of rationalize it a bit. But then when you really try to conceptualize it and conceptualize what that would look like playing out in the real world, it's kind of hard to even fathom. And so, how do
It,
you?
it actually isn't. If you show people, right, and here's how you show them. To wherever they are. If are you in the U.S., Stefan?
I lived in the U.S., but now I'm in Spain.
Okay, so if you're in Spain, take Bitcoin price in euro, and you'll see what it is today, and show people Bitcoin price in euro, and then take Bitcoin price in Turkey,
Hmm.
and you'll see in Turkey it's 2.2 million pieces of paper.
Okay. Yeah.
And then take Bitcoin price in Egypt, and you see it's 3.3 million pieces of paper. Then take Bitcoin price in Argentina, and I know you're laughing, but
Yeah. No, but
is the point. Then take it in Argentina, and it's 60 odd million pieces of paper. Now, when you do that, the person that you're doing it with will laugh and go, "Oh, those people in Argentina, they have no idea. They're pricing their houses and stuff from a piece of paper. No wonder it's like losing value." And everyone else can see it. And then that's what they're doing in Spain.
Hmm.
right? Because it's the same thing. It's essentially rate of debasement in your currency, and your people are measuring all of their prices by the rate of debasement in their currency.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really really good example, and I laugh because it's again one of those simple things that when you explain it, it's like it makes so much sense. But how? Because I think we kind of exactly like you said, right? We think of countries like Turkey or Argentina, where hyperinflation is rampant and it is a day to day problem and struggle. But we think like, oh, that could never happen in the U.S. or that could never happen in Europe. And so, how do you see that personally playing out? Do you see the system, falling in on itself to the point where, Bitcoin is the escape raft and everybody's almost forced into it? Or how do you see that like logically playing out?
I see it playing out over a long period of time. Yeah, but you don't have to wait for government. You don't have to wait for a business. It's a permissional open system. You can start living in the future today.
Hmm.
So, and every single person has that choice. Why I see it playing out over a long time is because if it was going to play out over a short term, all of the people in Argentina would not be pricing their homes and stuff through those pieces of paper.
Hmm.
Still are, right? And so why all of the people in Argentina or Turkey, and Turkey has a way higher rate of adoption than some places because more people know this, but it's still not 80, 100%. So you know how easy it is to get stuck in the system and use that unit bias. Um, Otherwise, this question wouldn't even come up. It's so obvious, right? That this is because it's bounded by energy and it's decentralized and secure, and you can't change the rules. It's repricing everything else. It's just people's belief that it isn't is holding them stuck into a system that is extracting value from them. So why will that take time? Because people's beliefs have to change.
Hmm. Very well said. And I like also, the points that you highlight where it's like it's already available in terms of like you can buy Bitcoin today. So also, part of what I try to do is I try to live and be and work in the system that I want to be in, kind of opt out of the existing system and put myself in this new Bitcoin system. But that being said, there are still a lot of challenges and exciting ones, I think, that we will face on the road to broader adoption. And I know that you personally are involved quite a bit in the Bitcoin space, and you just listed a few technologies like Lightning, Fediment, and those. But from your perspective, what are currently some of the biggest challenges towards wider spread Bitcoin adoption?
Probably the biggest is the knowledge the new system and this conversation we're having right now. You almost have to reprogram your brain to understand what's happening, and once you do, then it's easy. It's easy to see everywhere, and you move all your here. But um, but but I do. I also understand if through 5,000 years of history we've never seen something like this,
Hmm.
would be hard to see, right? I use in presentations often when Galileo built a telescope to look outside of the system everyone else was in. He looked like a crazy person, even though he was right. And as people looked through telescopes, more people realized. So Bitcoin's almost a telescope, right?
Hmm.
And people are looking through the telescope, and they're not going back to the old old version of reality. Now, so that is essentially, like I said before, the developing the mental scaffolding to understand, to um, to uh, to understand where it takes us to be able to move more of your time and energy into it. And then, like you, like me, I for a long time had I call myself a hypocrite because I was talking. I wrote the book. I was talking all over the world on why this was so important, and all of my time and energy was going on into essentially fiat-based companies, uh, because that's where my boards were. That was where my previous investments were, and everything. And so I was spending that time in helping companies I cared about, entrepreneurs I cared about, but it was misallocated to the world. Great. And why I say is waking up one night and realizing that. like, um, and so how could I complain about anybody else doing the same thing when I was doing? I had a hedge. I had a hedge against the system collapse. But with my energy, I was making the system collapse happen faster, right? And so I moved my time through creating ego death capital, so that I could commit it to Bitcoin and accelerate that. Now that's it's been so positive because then you meet people like Obi, you meet people like Roy from Breeze, and you're able to invest in technologies that solve problems that way before people can even see that those are needed. And they come out and they solve the next problem. So we already have scaling in Bitcoin that can take the state to 8 billion people. People just aren't aware of that yet. But when people are saying that Lightning can't scale, they're misguided. They're completely misguided. Lightning is the interoperability layer
Mm-hmm.
to then Fediment and eCash that allows us to scale to 8 billion people. And the technologies are actually already there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now, so Fedi will launch soon. I get it in beta right now, but the ability for that ability to scale and be ease of use, scaling to touch lots of people and in a very simple, intuitive way and safe way. Those are those are they were roadblocks to adoption because people felt it was too hard versus their existing system. So and now those roadblocks are just being removed. Why are they being removed? Because entrepreneurs solve problems and they create value by solving problems for people, and so it's just an extraordinarily exciting place to be because of that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think a lot of people, when they ask me now, it's Bitcoin now feels like, internet in the very early days where it's still a bit rough around the edges. I mean, as you mentioned, there are solutions like the Lightning Network, like Fediment, like Breeze, companies that are really making, cool and interesting products in the space that will allow us to interact very, I think, much more simply with Bitcoin. Um, and to that point, like, how do you see uh, Bitcoin usage as it is today? Because, like, for example, myself, right, I interact with Bitcoin for the most part on the base layer with cold storage, multi-sig or single sig hardware wallets, and then I have some funds on Lightning wallets as well. Is that something that you see that's um, scalable, or how do you see people, 8 billion people, for example, interacting with?
8 billion people will be on the base layer.
Okay.
It'll be for larger transactions and such, but they won't need to be because you'll have moved safety and security up in other layers, and they're tethered to a decentralized and secure protocol at the base layer. So they'll always have the option, but it'll cost more at the base layer in time. And a lot of the nonsense that is actually competing for fee space on the base layer too will go away because it's just it won't be economically viable there. Um, so why would you introduce an Oracle problem, Oracle into something on the base layer? You wouldn't. So that would be better solved at a second layer or third layer if you're going to kind of centralize and be an Oracle. It would be done somewhere else. Just because if you tried to do it on the base layer, you would have a cost disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
So the free market's going to solve all of those things, and these things are going to move up in layers to be able to where it's best solved. But I'll use an example through Betty today. Like if you wanted to set up a family um, multi-sig federation, and only your family could trade within it, you effectively have a 3 of 5 for 4 or 5 multi-sig. That you can trade back and forth, further with no cost to the base chain. So you got now. I still recommend hardware wallets and such, but you could have your own federation, and now extract that. Now you could have millions of different federations. You yourself could be in 20, 50. to, you can move money freely into all of them, back and forth. And so it is almost an explosion of regional banks. Like it's the type that you are the bank,
Hmm.
and anything within that federation doesn't even have lightning fees. And then federation to federation, it's lightning fees, but you wouldn't even know the interoperability of it is so simple that it's just the fee is different. So it allows you to, and probably more as important, if you were in North Korea, and your guardians or your federation was outside of North Korea, there's just no way for them to ever find the federation, and all of the communication and all of the money transfer in there is completely private. Um, so it produces for the kind of 4 billion, 4.5 billion people stuck under autocratic or totalitarian control and dictators. It's a life saving technology that allows them to communicate, and 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 it also puts guardrails on overreach by governments in other countries that are trying to become more centralized and more control, um, taking away individual rights and freedoms. So you have this free market force, just like there would obviously be, right? Humans aren't going to live in cages. Um, so you'd have this free market force that is the antithesis of where the world is going, and that would be developed far before the
Hmm.
world knew going there, right? Because entrepreneurs go and solve problems in the future for where things are going.
Yeah.
They see what's coming.
Yeah, fully agreed. I think, well, for me, Fedi is also something as a Bitcoiner that I'm super excited for because I've been following Obi and the work there for some time. I've downloaded the beta, but I think it's one of those things also that like you only start to see the real benefits of it when there's a network on it and when more people are using it. And so I'm excited to play around with that and also even just like but even now, right, like the other day I was watching I don't know if you saw it, but Jack Dorsey had been wearing this like Satoshi shirt he wore to like the Super Bowl. I was like, man, that's a cool shirt, and I know the store that he bought it from, and it was like a lightning based store, right? And just doing that transaction through the lightning store where you just scan a QR code, you get a lightning invoice, and it's so effortless, so permissionless. It just feels like a hack, and it's just a system that's already there, and it's you're just waiting for the rest of the world to catch up, right?
I use Lightning every day. I use in Bitcoin every day. So and now more and more so on Fedi. But it's all interoperable. That's the point. These are all protocols that are interoperable with each other. And now, have you spent much time on Nostr?
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So that again, all of these things are interoperable, and they come to and it's moving so fast because the free market is moving into those, and you can quickly build other tools, other use cases that give the entire network. That's the beautiful thing about this is every node in the network makes every other node and every other person in this network stronger. It's a beautiful thing in that way.
Yeah, it is really, really beautiful. And there's a lot more layers that we could unpack there. But um, one of the final questions that I have for you is, given that it's a time where we just had the most recent halving, it's kind of the beginning of the 4-year cycle where things kind of line up for a bull market. Naturally, I think people will enter the space more in the next year. So, what is your advice to any new Bitcoiners who are or new users who are entering the space for the first time?
Um, Learn why. Just keep learning. And then, so probably the best advice is this, because if you're spending, if you're spending 1% of your time here, spend 2%. You're spending two, spend four. You're spending four, spend eight. And through that process, you're going to be happier and happier and happier, and you're going to see more and more opportunities. If you're not running a node, run a node. Learn how to run a node. But as you do, as you go to meetups, as you see the opportunities, as you meet people building into this space, you're going to get more and more excited about the because you're going to be moving your time. You're already living in the future. You're already living in the future with people who are building just the most beautiful where we're going. It's really powerful. So whatever amount of time you're spending in this, obviously you might be spending 100% or 80%, double it. But if you're spending four or six, double it. And you'll find that many more opportunities. It'll just be a mirror back at you, and you'll see all of the other. You'll meet people that are doing the most crazy, incredible things, and you'll be a part of that, and you'll see more opportunities. So spend that time. Whether it starts at going to meetups in your local area, if there's not a meetup in your local area, start a meetup in your local area. This is a permissionless system. You just go.
Hmm. It's an exciting system. It's a really it's a community of really amazing individuals. Everybody I've spoken to in the space has been incredible, and yeah, I'm excited for what the future holds. But Jeff, I really appreciate your time. Where can my listeners, find more about it? Is the work that you're doing? Get in touch with you, or just in general?
Ego death, if somebody's looking for capital or company idea formation, Ego Death Capital is probably best. At Ego Death Capital, or just the contact form at Ego Death Capital. My personal website is jeffbooth.ca, and the only reason I highlight the personal website is if my social media is not on there, it's not me. So I'm primarily now on Nostr and don't spend much time on anything else. But just if I just know there's so many people trying to impersonate me to try to part. I will never ask for money. So if somebody asks you for money or to teach, tune out. There's just too many imposters. So go to one of those sites to find the real me, I guess.
Perfect. I'll be sure to put all of the correct links in the show notes for my listeners. Jeff, thanks again so much for your time. It was a pleasure, and super super insightful as always.
Yeah, you too, Stefan, and good work here.
Thank you.